back to Good Guardian Canine Working Dog. Good Guardian Canine Working Dog, more than just dogs. Continuing the conversation of the old family red nose, the Rolls Royce of game dogs.
And that's the Ninja dog. Ninja! What's wrong, son? Every time a circle dries up, it gets straight again.
Yeah.
Ninja! Ninja's a pure Hemphill dog. Very pure.
Beyond discussing size and as it relates to gameness or does it not, and defining gameness as to what exactly gameness is. Of course, I know many of you already know what this is, what gameness is. If you're quite familiar with game dogs, whether they are American Pit Bull Terriers or other breeds. If you're familiar with game dogs at all, you have some idea of what gameness is. But beyond explaining that, defining gameness and explaining a bit about the size of the dogs to conclude, I guess the next point would be the modern old family red nose. Are they game or are they not? That's a question that has a two-part answer to it, at least from my perspective, and as it relates to historical measuring or determining of whether a dog is game or not. And the first part of that, I would say, the dogs are game to a degree. I say that because the question would be asked, in order to determine whether or not the dogs are game, by what means are you determining whether the dogs are game or not? Traditionally, historically, the means which were used to determine a dog's gameness were very, very effective and worked. The modern terms, there's room there for skepticism, at least on my part, at least I think. Because if you're using a hog to test a dog's gameness, the hog is not sufficient to test the dog's gameness. Because the hog's intention is not to battle your dog to the end to determine who is victorious. The hog's intention is to defend as much as it needs to, and then try its best to get away from the dog. And so the hog wouldn't present a very good candidate for, or a very good means by determining whether the dog is severely, extremely game or not. Can you determine a level of gameness from hog catching, hog hunting? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. But to the full extent of gameness, as gameness has been determined in a dog historically, you would not be able to do that with a hog. The second point, as I said, this is a two-part answer. Are the modern old family red nose game or are they not? Second part of that two-part answer, the answer is most are not. Most are not. And I would push it to say that 98%, and I might be generous there by saying 98%, it's probably 99, but we'll say 98% for now. Most of the old family red nose that are present today are not game. They're not. They're curs. The reason for that is they're not bred anymore to be game as they were historically. They're not bred that way. Unfortunately, other lines of game dogs, other strains of game dogs are bred to still be very capable, very driven dogs. As I said, the modern dogs are not bred the same way the dogs of the past history were bred. These modern dogs are bred differently, and many factors are causing this. Quite a few factors are at play here why the modern dogs are not really bred the same way or bred to be game as the dogs in the past are. Now, when I say the modern dogs, please keep in mind I'm speaking on the old family red nose, not every other strain of the American Pit Bull Terrier. I'm dealing with the old family red-nosed dogs. So one of the reasons why the dogs are not as game as they should, as the dogs in the past were, is the breakdown in masculinity in the males of this generation. Modern men are not as masculine in the way they carry themselves, in attitude, in tone of behavior. I don't mean tone of voice. Tone of behavior, meaning measure of behavior. The way they behave, the functionality of the men of today are not the same. The men of today are more confused about who they are and are behaving more like women. They're more feminine. And when you have this type of a breakdown, everything in that path or everything in that train of thinking is affected by that type of a breakdown, because the world is influenced the greatest by men. Men are making things. Men are deciding what stands and what falls. In a materialistic sense, I mean, not from a spiritual perspective. But I don't want to turn this into a sidebar conversation, but suffice it to say that the men of today are not the same as the men of the past, who were more driven to work and to take care of their families and to be a primary breadwinner in their household, and were men that had farm and animals and flocks, livestocks, and most of the time, if meat was included in dinner, it had to be caught. It's a totally different world that we're living in. And so there's this breakdown in the masculine functionality of the men of today. And so if any of these men happen to be game dog men, at best for the most part, especially those who are under 39, they're pretty much dog boys. They're not really dog men. Now, that is not a way to say that we don't have younger dog men that are very good dog men. Yes, we do. But I'm saying generally, for the most part, the modern males are not as masculine as they should be in the way they carry themselves, in what they can tolerate, how they behave. It's a totally different world. It's more so a confused generation than anything else. So that's one factor affecting the good quality dogs that we don't see anymore as much as we should. It's the breakdown in the masculinity or masculine attitude, behavior, qualities, characteristics in men today. For the most part, women are leading them. That's one factor. The next, the dogs really don't have the same jobs that they used to do in the past. The jobs have changed a lot. For the most part, what the dogs are required to do is not really a requirement anymore. It's a few fanciers, a few dog boys who are doing this for pastime. So you may find a few and far between a couple of dogs that really display some gameness. Also, one of the factors that are affecting the dogs, why we don't see much dogs with real solid gameness anymore, or a high level of gameness in quality, is the dogs are bred today more for aesthetics. They're bred for looks. They're not really bred for internal qualities, for the heart of the dog, if I could put it that way. They're not really bred for guts and grit. They're bred for show and bred for just looks. It's more of a show and tell dog, especially the old family red nose. It's been watered down a lot. It's becoming this modern fad, almost like these blue dogs that so many are confused about and are calling them American Pit Bull Terrier, when they're absolutely not. So that's another factor why a lot of these red nose, old family red nose, are not really driven. They're not game. They're bred for looks. They're bred more they're bred for more of a show dog than a working dog. And another factor that's affecting the dogs a lot is who is breeding a lot of the dogs. A lot of the dogs are being bred by women who are breeding the dogs based on emotionalism and not so much working quality. If the dogs are pretty and they're fancy and they turn heads and they get a lot of attention, they're cute and cuddly, that dog is bred. Many times skittish dogs are being bred. There's no testing of the dogs anymore to see if the dogs are actually game. And there are many ways to test a dog's gameness. But the dogs are not being tested generally to prove breed worthy. Like in places like Germany, you have the BST, used to be called the breed suitability test. I'm not sure if in Germany if it's still listed as that, but you have the German Korung for Rottweilers that were used to test the breed suitability, the worthiness of a dog to be bred. You don't have this in the old family red nose, at least not anymore. There's no testing to prove whether the dog is sound in terms of its game drive and good quality as a solid old family red nose dog. So that's another factor. A lot of the dog men or dog boys who are involved with the dogs now are just breeding to try and win a point. It's not really to preserve and to enhance the quality and to produce a better dog, for the most part. So to find a good old family red nose now that is it's game, very few and far between. Most are not good, most are not game. Just because a dog is an old family red nose, doesn't make it a good one. It can be an old family red nose and still be trash.